Hello everybody, this is Mr. Rob, and I know it's been a little bit, about a week, but welcome back to episode number 58 of the Detroit Lions franchise here on Madden NFL 21. Sorry for the little bit of a break in uploads. It's been, I think, last Friday was when the last upload was posted. Spent some time with some family, played some golf, I ain't gonna lie. But we're back here, and we had the preseason highlights of Year 3, our last stop before the 2022 season unfolds. So if you're excited for this one, make sure you leave a like and subscribe down below, especially if you want more franchise content. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go through all 4 preseason games for the Lions and kind of talk about what the roster looks like, the depth chart going into the year. I'll have highlights in the background. Well, talk about them a little bit as they unfold, but I'm going to kind of go position by position and tell you just kind of what the depth chart looks like for the upcoming season. The first game in the preseason slate is a home matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were not very good last year. Tom Brady is still at the helm, but he had his worst season of his career, and the Buccaneers were a top 3 worst team in football a year ago. But let's talk about our Detroit Lions, who last year they finished 6-10 in their own right. Not very good, had the 6th overall pick in the draft and are looking for a rebound. Made some moves in free agency, not a lot. There's still a lot of salary cap troubles on this team, and we're trying to maneuver through them. I think after this season, it should get a little better. But let's start off on offense. And in these preseason highlights, not gonna lie, the offense struggled at times, especially at the quarterback position. We do have Matthew Stafford at quarterback. He did return this season. There was a lot of talk about his future going into the 2022 campaign, but he is back at the helm, and he didn't look like his usual Matthew Stafford self in preseason. He missed a lot of throws, had some bad judgment, threw a lot of interceptions, and it's not really the Matthew Stafford we've come to see in Detroit. Yes, he had a lot of turnovers a season ago, but right as I said, there was a nice throw to Kenny Golladay on the slant pattern. But Stafford, he is still the quarterback going into the season. As you can see here is a sack fumble that's picked up by Tampa Bay. But Matthew Stafford did not have a good preseason at all, but he is the starting quarterback. However, he is one more year on his contract. He will be a free agent after this year, so we have no idea what's going to happen with him. As here's a good play by Tracy Walker, the strong safety who signed a 3-year extension, and he's going to take this one to the house for a pick 6. But back to Matthew Stafford, he is the quarterback. Behind him it has been Chase Daniel as the backup. Thankfully, really haven't had to play backup. Matthew Stafford has been an Iron Man for the majority of his career. He's had some injuries late in his career, but he's been pretty healthy for the most part, I'd say, for the past couple of seasons. But Chase Daniel was our backup, but we did make a signing in the offseason before training camp. We haven't really had a young quarterback to develop for a while, so we brought in undrafted quarterback Thompson Robbins out of UCLA and Dorian. He just kind of fits the system. Don't really think he'll be too much. I wouldn't consider him the starter of the future, but I wanted to bring in a young guy to develop. He kind of competed with Chase Daniel for that backup spot. He had a couple of nice throws. However, with Thompson Robbins being practice squad eligible, we're going to roll with Chase Daniel as the primary backup, and if we need to, we do have Robbins on the practice squad. So that's kind of how the quarterback position unfolds. Then we get to running back, where last year it was Kerryon Johnson, DeAndre Swift split. Johnson got slightly the majority of the carries, but Swift was more involved in the pass game than Johnson was. But this year there is no Kerryon Johnson. He left Detroit in the offseason. Detroit wanted to bring him back. However, Johnson was asking for a 5-year deal, and Detroit wasn't really willing to offer him a 5-year deal. They offered him up to 3 years, and instead Kerryon Johnson took a 5-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He isn't the starter in Pittsburgh, but that contract longevity was enough to sway him to go to the Steel City. So what happened? We still have DeAndre Swift on roster. He's coming into his 3rd season. He had a career high in receptions and receiving yards a season ago, and he looked pretty good in preseason, I would say. He was very productive, especially later on we'll see in the Green Bay game. But going into the season, I wasn't really convinced Swift could be the bell cow back. He is still a little smaller in size, hasn't really proven if he can get the majority of the carries. So Detroit did look to replace that power back spot, and they signed former Green Bay Packer Jamal Williams to a 3-year contract. Now, a lot of skepticism about the length of the deal. Is Jamal Williams, who's kind of been phased out of Green Bay, is he worth a 3-year deal? Maybe the Detroit overpaid for a power back, but that is the plan going into the season. Swift and Williams will be the 1-2 punch this year, except Swift will be number 1 on the depth chart to start. Johnson was number 1 a season ago, but Swift will be number 1 on the depth chart. Expect him to get a little bit more carries from underneath center. He didn't really get those a season ago, but Jamal Williams will still be featured, so it will be a two-headed tandem. Now behind them, we do have second-year running back Trey Ragas out of Louisiana, who did pretty good in the preseason. And then there was Jason Huntley, who was more of a receiving back, and he's been on the Lions roster for a couple seasons, mostly been on the practice squad, but he had a very good preseason in my opinion. I was very impressed with Huntley. And here's Trey Ragas right here, big hole up the middle as he reaches all the way to the safeties. He did a pretty good job running the football in these games, and I think we're going to try to stick with the run game this season, especially with Stafford not playing as good as he usually has. I think the run game can be an emphasis. But we're only going to carry 3 running backs on roster, and we decided to go with Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, and Trey Ragas. Yes, that means Jason Huntley did not make the cut, and he is not on the practice squad currently, so he is a free agent. However, if there is, injuries to the running back position, we can always re-sign Huntley back if we need depth. But we're going to roll with the 3-headed attack of Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, and then Trey Ragas. Maybe we'll see him a little bit. I do want to get him a little bit more experience on the field this coming season. That'll take us to our wide receiver group. And going into the year, it is Kenny Golladay. Well, last year it was Kenny Golladay, Cordero Patterson, Danny Amendola, and then we had Tyler Vaughn as a 4th receiver who kind of stepped up into that number 3 role a season ago, and he played very well in the slot. However, Danny Amendola did retire, and Cordero Patterson has had a little bit of regression. He's starting to slow down a little bit. Patterson was signed to a 3-year deal off-season ago, so we do have Patterson on the books for 2 more years. But Kenny Golladay, who got hurt later in the season a year ago, Tyler Vaughn's had to step up, and he didn't really do overly well as a number 1, number 2 target, showing that he still has plenty of room to go. But look at this last play of the first preseason game, a deep ball to Vaughn's, who gets behind the Tampa Bay secondary, and he scores a 59-yard touchdown. Kind of a fluke touchdown for Vaughn's, but it's nice to get him some experience and get him into the end zone. We lose the first preseason game 42-24 with 4 turnovers, and unfortunately that was the theme of the preseason. This game, it was the fumbles, too many coughed up footballs. But before we jump back to wide receiver, second game will be against the Washington football team, who, remember, represented the NFC in the Super Bowl last season. But we're going to jump back to wide receiver. So we have Kenny Golladay, who is the bona fide number 1. He is our star player, not just at wide receiver, but on offense. And then behind him, Tyler Vaughn will be the number 2 receiver. Not entirely sure how he's going to do. I'll touch more about receivers in a little bit, since here's another bad throw by Stafford into triple coverage as Dante Hightower comes away with the interception. But Vaughns will be on roster. We'll still have Cordero Patterson to get some snaps, but I'm going to cut back on the receiver core as there was a late change, or a late addition, shall I say. But another receiver to look out for is Seth Williams, another second-year man. He is out of Auburn. And Seth Williams, if you remember, he had that one game last season where he absolutely dominated. And he showed plenty of glimpses in that game. And in my opinion, Seth Williams might have been the star receiver of the preseason. He made a lot of plays. He got some chances in the slot, got some chances on the outside. And I think Seth Williams definitely made the most of his opportunities. So I do want him to see the field more often. Other players we had Daz Newsome, another second-round wide receiver, him out of North Carolina. And then undrafted rookie Bobby Proell, who did end up making the team. Now at tight end, the other receiver spot, tight end, TJ Hawkinson had a pretty good year a season ago, and he would be going into a contract year, but we did pick up Hawkinson's 5th-year option, so we have Hawkinson on roster for this season and next season. I want to get him more involved, specifically in the red zone. As here's Stafford taking a deep shot to Patterson. He can't come away with it in triple coverage. But I want to get Hockenson more involved in specifically the red zone, kind of give Stafford another target, a security blanket he can have across the middle. But Hockenson is the bona fide number 1 tight end. And behind him at the number 2 tight end is Jesse James, who has been the number 2 tight end for a couple of seasons. And unfortunately, I don't think he's been used to his best potential. I think Jesse James has a lot to offer to the team. He made a couple good plays, as you'll see a little later on in preseason. But Jesse James is that number 2 tight end, and we're only going to carry 2 tight ends on roster. Technically 3 if you consider it long snapper Jacob Bobenmoyer. But Hunter Bryant, who's been kind of a practice squad, active roster rotation tight end, he was not brought back, and he is actually a free agent as well. But kind of like the same thing with Jason Huntley. If we do need a tight end, he is still available in the free agent market. Well, let's go to the offensive line, shall we? It does it for the skill positions, as there is a pick 6 by Stafford as the curl route. As you'll see, these preseason highlights was not our fan favorite route in this highlights section. But on the offensive line had a lot of change. But left tackle did stay the same. We do have Taylor Decker still at left tackle. However, he would get hurt a little later in the preseason. More about that when he pops up. But Taylor Decker, he is our left tackle, but he has been proven to be injury prone, and we might need a backup replacement. More on that, as last year we had undrafted rookie Jake Burton be our backup left tackle, and he actually got a lot of time with Decker's injury, and he didn't really do so good. Jake Burton will start off on the practice squad. We also had left tackle Stone Forsythe on roster. He unfortunately is not on the practice squad either. So Stone Forsythe was the other one. But we're going to go with Taylor Decker at left tackle. And at left guard is a change. Last year it was Joe Dahl. Joe Dahl left in free agency, and we went out and we signed Laken Tomlinson of the San Francisco 49ers to be our left tackle, or left guard, signed a 1-year deal in the offseason, so he will solidify the left guard position. And then at center, we still have Frank Ragnow. He is the backbone of that offensive line. He does a very good job communicating, and he is a big reason why we did pretty good in the run game in preseason. On the right side, Kelechi Osemele is back. He signed a 1-year deal in the offseason, 1-year contract extension. As here's a QB sneak by the backup in Washington, Marcus Mariota, trying to resurrect his career now in Landover. So it's interesting to see him still with a spot after backing up the Las Vegas Raiders. But back to our offensive line, Osemele signed a 1-year extension. He also had some injury problems, but at least we have former second-round guard Jonah Jackson backing him up. I do want to see him get potential at some point, but Osemele will be our starting right guard. And then a right tackle, we had Vaitai and Tyrell Crosby there a season ago. Vaitai is back, however, Tyrell Crosby is not. And instead, we have former Minnesota Viking Rick Wagner starting at right tackle. He signed a 1-year contract as well. So 2 new starters on the offensive line. I feel pretty good about them, as there's that highlight I was talking about with Jesse James elevating over 2 football team members with a 42-yard reception. You just cannot deny that big size that Jesse James has, and he can go up and get it like a basketball. As there's a nice slant pattern to Seth Williams. But hopefully, I do feel the offensive line is a little improved from a season ago, especially at that left guard spot. I think Tomlinson will be a good, at the very least, 1-year replacement, as we did draft Elijah Vera Tucker in the 3rd round out of UAC to be hopefully that left guard of the future. But that does it for the offensive side of things. Moving on to the defense. And the defense also kind of scared me a little bit in preseason, specifically in run defense. The run defense did not look very good, as you've probably seen from a couple of these highlights, as there's another interception. I don't think Seth Williams really ran the right route that time, leading to a Chase Daniels pick to close out this game against Washington. We lose this one 25-17. Once again, the passing yards did better than Washington, however, 5 turnovers in this game, so 9 through 2 games. Stafford with 3 interceptions of his own. And also in this game, I didn't really highlight it, but we did have an injury, unfortunately, as Foyesade went out. Foyesade Aluokun was injured in this one, and he unfortunately will miss a little bit of time. He had a torn labrum, and he will miss the first 2 games of the season. So that's a little bit of a bummer, as we signed him in the offseason to help in pass coverage. But in the third game, we will see the Chicago Bears, who we'll also see 2 times this season, and their revamped offense with Trey Lance now at the helm in Chicago. So we get our first glimpse of him, and this is the 3rd preseason game. So that means you'll be seeing Trey Lance for 3 quarters. But back to the defensive side of things. Unfortunately, we didn't do so good in run defense. The passing defense they were kind of bend but don't break to an extent. But starting off on the defensive line, which is where we struggled in the run stopping, which is kind of surprising because I thought the defensive line was one of our stronger suits. We also have Trey Flowers anchoring that right side interior rotation alignment. He's had a phenomenal couple of years. We re-signed Romeo Okwara to a 1-year extension. He's coming off back-to-back 11-sack seasons. He's also a nice rotational pass rusher. We got some glimpses of Julian Okwara as well, the former Notre Dame Fighting Irish, going into his 3rd season at a rotational pass rusher as well. And we did sign Nathan Shepard before preseason started to kind of be a run-stopping lineman. He didn't really do his job that well, considering we gave up a lot of big run gains, but he will be the starting left end going into the season. We also tried Austin Bryant over there at left end, kind of in the pass rush. He didn't really do so good. Austin Bryant will not be brought back, as here's a beautiful throw by Stafford across his body to the 4. But Austin Bryant, unfortunately, did not make the team, and will be rolling with Nathan Shepard there. Also had a signing late in preseason at that position as well. As here's Taylor Decker. Here's a nice run by Swift into the end zone, but Taylor Decker is injured. More on him in a little bit. Talked about him being prone to injury. As look at this play by Chicago. Poor tackling by Detroit. Technically, this is a run by the tight end Cole Kmet. He's going to go 75 yards to the house. Not what you want to see if you're a Detroit Lions fan. Cole Kmet should not be scoring 75-yard touchdowns, especially on the ground. But back to that D-line on the interior, where I think we're the strongest, as Trey Flowers rotates inside on pass downs, and we did move Deshaun Hand to a defensive tackle position. He signed a 3-year contract extension during the season last year and didn't really have a good season. I think most of that's because we transitioned to more of a 4-3 defense, and he was kind of still being used on that edge position, not really his strong suits. So he's going to move inside, and he will be partnered with last year's first-round pick Marvin Wilson, who had a very good rookie campaign, but I'm expecting him to break out in season number 2, as there's another interception on the curl route. So Hand and Wilson will be inside. Flowers will rotate inside on pass downs, and we did not bring back Danny Shelton, which I guess had a little bit more of a bigger impact than I thought, as Shelton was that run-stopping defensive tackle, and we obviously gave up a lot of big runs. So that kind of does it for the offense or defensive line. Okwara is that right end spot, coming off his back-to-back good seasons. I thought he deserved to start at right end. Now going into the linebackers, where we were very bad a season ago, in my opinion. Not very good in pass coverage. Did improve a little bit later in the season once we moved Nate Landman to that nickel linebacker position, and I thought he did a pretty good job. He did good enough to be named the starting middle linebacker for this season. Now we'll have to see if Nate Landman is ready for such a task, but he will anchor the middle of the field. I wasn't going to really include him in pass downs, but since Foyesade will miss the beginning of the season, expect to see Nate Landman in nickel situations as well. Now next to him is the last year's NFL Defensive Player of the Year, Jamie Collins, who's coming off a career year, as he basically did it all. Led the NFL in tackles, had some sacks, had 4 interceptions, including picking off but Bears starting quarterback a season ago, Nick Foles, 3 times. So hopefully we'll get to see Nick Foles some this year and allow on Collins to have a couple more receptions. But Collins will be at left outside linebacker. Middle outside linebacker is Nate Landman. And then right outside linebacker was Foyesade, who we signed in the offseason to a 2-year deal. However, he will miss a little bit of time to start the season, so we'll have to rely on a couple of young players. Dax Holyfield will get the chance to start, an undrafted linebacker. Actually, no, we drafted Dax Holyfield. What am I talking about? But the rookie will get a chance. We also drafted Ernest Jones out of South Carolina to be a little bit of depth, as well as Mike Rose later in the 7th round. So a couple of unproven young linebackers will get a chance early in the season with the injury to Foyesade. As here is a touchdown by Chicago. We just saw another interception against Detroit. Plenty of those in this section of the episodes. We start to get to the end of the fourth quarter. Don't want to move on to the secondary yet because this one is about over. As we start to drive, get to the 4-yard line of Chicago, only down by 8. Handoff to Huntley, who powers his way into the end zone. Like I said, Huntley did very good in preseason. He just couldn't make the squad. However, the 2-point conversion was unsuccessful, and we lose this one 27-25. 3 more interceptions in the book because why not? Now, after this game, we saw a little bit of the change, and part of the reason I didn't want to touch on the secondary is because the change had to deal with the secondary. As Justin Coleman, I talked about, was on the trade block in the offseason. We didn't get a deal done in the offseason, but in the preseason, we did get a deal. He was traded. Before we get there, have a couple of upgrades. TJ Hawkinson gets an upgrade. Our starting tight end, who I said we picked up his 5th-year option. Joel Iyebuniwe, a bunch of the football. First time, I'm going to have to learn that one. Joel Iyebuniwe also got an upgrade. And as you can see, Taylor Decker, he broke his ribs. He will miss the first 4 games of the season. So the first quarter, we will be out our starting left tackle again. Tyler Vaughns gets a good upgrade, gets nice to his route running as we look to improve on his 2nd year. But back on Justin Coleman, we're starting to get some trade offers now. We are in the final week of the preseason. You can see them on your screen. And the one that made sense to me was the Las Vegas Raiders. They were offering a 3rd and a 7th for Coleman. Raiders need help at corners. Their number 1 corner is Trayvon Mullen. So we decided to take the deal. We shipped Justin Coleman to Las Vegas. And that does free a little bit of cap space up. So we make a couple of veteran signings. Josh Wells, Charles Harris, and Golden Tate III. Yes, the former Lion, Golden Tate III, is returning for his age 34 season. I talked about, I thought we needed a little bit more help at wide receiver. So we brought in Golden Tate. And then Charles Harris was brought in at left end because Nathan Shepard wasn't too, over the top, and Austin Bryant didn't really impress that much. And then Josh Wells is brought in at left tackle to kind of be a stopgap left tackle spot while Taylor Decker missed the beginning of the season. But a couple of veteran signings to kick off week 4. And going into the secondary, I was going to talk about Justin Coleman, who was listed at cornerback number 1, but not anymore as he was traded to the Raiders a moment ago. So that means 3rd-year Ohio State corner Jeff Okudah, who is coming off a breakout season, will be your number 1 listed corner, as the very first pass to Golden Tate results in a catch fumble. Not how Golden Tate wants to start off his Detroit return season. But Okudah will be your number 1 corner. He did improve to Superstar X Factor as well, so I think he is up to the task. He's been covering a lot of number 1 receivers anyway in these games, like when we used to play the Packers when they used to have Davante Adams, who's now in New York. Davante Adams would get covered by him. We'd also stick him on Allen Robinson when we played Chicago, and then he would get a lot of Adam Thielen when we played Minnesota. So Okudah's basically already covering number 1 wide receivers. Next to him, though, now will be Daryl Worley. Last year it was Desmond Trufant. He did leave in free agency to Cincinnati, as that was an unfortunate circumstance, as we did want to bring back Trufant. But instead, we brought in cornerback Daryl Worley for a 2-year deal. Worley spent a season ago in a return to Carolina and had a career year, as here's a phenomenal run by DeAndre Swift. But Worley had 7 interceptions. That is a career high. And he cashed in with a 2-year deal with Detroit. I think he's still pretty young. He does very good in man coverage, which we want to do a lot more man coverage this season. So he will be cornerback number 2. And then cornerback number 3, the nickel corner, will be 2nd-round pick Tywone Mullen out of Indiana. Now, Tywone Mullen was a 2nd-round pick. He does have hidden development. However, he does have a lot of raw skills. His coverage skills aren't necessarily there yet. However, I think giving him some experience in the slot could do dividends. I also wanted to experiment with maybe Foyesay moving into the slot. However, I do think I'll keep him inside and give Tywone Mullen some of the slot snaps. Another cornerback on roster who I'd like to see get some snaps in the slot is Amani O'Rourke, who a season ago kind of split some time between being on the practice squad, being on the active roster. And I'm very glad he wasn't picked up off of our practice squads. I thought he had a very good chance of that happening. But O'Rourke played pretty good in preseason, and he's kind of been on the roster for a little bit. He's a little bit more refined than Mullen is. I think Mullen is more better for the slot, so if something happens to one of our outside corners, I think O'Rourke would be the first replacement for those positions. But on the inside, I do think Mullen is the way to go. We're going to give him a shot. We also drafted corner Elijah Griffin in the 6th round. We actually traded both of our 7th round picks for Elijah Griffin. However, he did go to the practice squad, so he's still on the practice squad, should get a little bit of development, but he's also a very raw corner. But I just liked his credentials, and for the value of the 6th round, he kind of just fell into our lap. But he's another developmental corner we have on roster. At the safety position, specifically the free safety, we have Kyle Hamilton, the rookie out of Notre Dame, our 1st round selection at the number 6 overall pick. A very good center field safety coming out of college. He will fill that role that was occupied by Anthony Levine a season ago. Levine did retire, but Hamilton, I think, is an improvement. Very good in zone coverage. Is not the fastest safety, but he does cover too much ground, as there is another pick 6 against us in the preseason. This will be the last preseason highlight, because as we go down 42-28, there's really not much else to show. But at the strong safety position, we do have Tracy Walker, who's a very good coverage safety, good in man, good in zone. He returns after signing a 3-year extension of his own in the season last year. And then at backup safety, mostly Will Harris will be the strong safety. He will also fluctuate to free safety in case something else happens to Hamilton. So our 3 safeties will mostly be Hamilton, Walker, and Harris. But that's going to do it for the preseason highlights. Next up was the preseason cuts. We do get a couple of upgrades. Cameron Smith, a rotational linebacker. He's been on our roster for a little bit. He gets an upgrade of his own. And then we get one new injury, and it was Golden Tate. In case you saw, he'll have to wait a little bit longer before making his official Detroit return, as he should be available in week 3 as well. But it is time for cuts. I'm not going to show every single cut. I've kind of talked about them. They are on your screen. I thought I'd show you more of the list. We did move Julian Okwara to the practice squad momentarily. More on that in a second. He didn't make the roster, kind of just because we had some injuries. I kind of needed some depth at other positions. So Julian Okwara was unfortunately the surprising cut to end the preseason. But here's a look at our roster going into year 3. Have a couple of injuries. I don't know if we could threaten for the division. I do not think we're quite there yet. I do think we're making steps in the right direction. However, I do think this team does have a lot of room to grow. And it's kind of just telling what happens at the quarterback position of how does Matthew Stafford play in his age 35 season. Matt Prater and Corey Bojorquez are our specialists. Jack Fox has not returned, and we did replace him. And we also next year have a lot of draft capital, as you'll see in just a second. A 1st rounder, a 2nd rounder, 2/3, 3/4, a 5th, a 6th, and 3/7. But back to Julian Okwara. Unfortunately, he was signed off of our practice squad by the Buffalo Bills. So Okwara did not last long in Detroit, and we will see him this year if he's still on roster. We do play the Buffalo Bills. Tywone Mullen gets an upgrade, as well as Seth Williams, 2nd-year wide receiver. Like I said, I'd like to see him get more involved. He's got very good hands, just needs to work on that route running a little bit more. Kyle Hamilton, our 1st-round pick, also gets a zone upgrade. However, the only thing that upgraded was awareness. He is now a 75 overall, 82 zone coverage. It's very good out of the box. Here is our regular season schedule. We're going to start off with the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Have a lot of road matchups in a row. We do have a primetime Thursday night game at Minnesota, and we're going to play the Bears as well, and then the Patriots on Thanksgiving this year, and we end with the Green Bay Packers. Next episode, it will be the Philadelphia Eagles at home in our season opener. Still a pretty decent roster. We didn't highlight them in the preseason. Don't really think they'll challenge for the division. I think they have too many holes on their roster. The wide receiver group is getting a little older. Alshon Jeffrey is not who he used to be. Ertz is still a good tight end. That offensive line, though, is just atrocious outside of Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson. And then defensive line, you still got Brandon Graham, still got Fletcher Cox, a couple of players to worry about. However, at linebacker, I do think we could take advantage of them. And it's funny because their middle linebackers, or our middle linebackers a season ago, they signed Jelani Tavai and Gerard Davis in free agency. So it'll be interesting. I do think we can get off to a nice start with a win against Philly. It'll be a very telling game. That'll be next episode. That'll be coming to you guys on Monday. That's going to do it here for the preseason highlights. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe down below, especially if you want more franchise content. This is Mr. Rob, and I'll see you in the next one.